What's good, everybody? My name is Taetro here with Ujam, here today to talk to you all about Usynth. Usynth is an instrument that's built to be welcoming and accessible so that any musician, regardless of skill level and technical ability, can start making music right away. It's a very powerful synth that you have hands-on control for sculpting your sound, but the parameters you'll be tweaking are named with simple terms that any music maker can understand. I'll walk you through the basics of using Usynth today, but first, why don't I give you a few sound demos made with Usynth. So those were just some quick demos I wrote, but all of the synth sounds you heard were using Usynth, and the drum sounds you heard were using other Ujam plugins, which I'll shout out at the end of this video. I'm going to load up Usynth from my plugin browser onto an empty MIDI track. I'm using Ableton Live today, but you can use Usynth with any DAW that accepts VST plugins. So I've immediately loaded into a Turbo XT sound on Usynth, which is really cool. But we gotta jump back one step further so I can show you what this plugin is all about. First, if I click up here in the left where it says Turbo XT, that's our current selected Usynth title. And you can see here on the left all of the available Usynth titles, each holding unique presets often based on a style or a genre. There's a trial for each title so you can explore how each one sounds. Let's switch to Core, which is a title with all the essential sounds we might need. Not every title will have every instrument type, but Core has every instrument type represented, whether that be bass, lead, or some sequences. From here, I'll navigate to the type of sound. I want a lead sound today, and let's choose Galaxy Fanfare because that sounds really fun, and hear what it sounds like. Cool sounding lead sound, but let's start tweaking it. I'm going to exit out of this preset browser, and here we get the main interface of Usynth. It might look like a lot at first, but don't worry, we're going to break it down piece by piece. Starting with this centerpiece right here, the synthesizer piece of the instrument, which is how we'll adjust the core character of our sound. So we have dark/bright, which does exactly what it says it does. We can go from having a darker sound to brightening it up. And then we have fast and slow. These two parameters here are going to be the same no matter what preset we load in Usynth. Fast and slow is a bit like adjusting our envelope. So if I go to fast, we get a nice short sound. If I crank that up to slow, so oftentimes fast and slow will have an effect on attack as well as the release time. So here at fast, we get a nice attack, and as I crank it up to slow, we get a much slower attack, the beginning sound of that note. Next, let's take a look at these three knobs down here. These will change per different type of sound depending on the type of sound that it is. So here we've got a section size, which is kind of making us have like a much wider ensemble-y type sound the more I crank that up. Sub, which is generating a sub frequency. If I take that away, then dial it in, you can hear that bass frequency coming in. and fatness. See how that changes our sound. These will have transformative effects on the basic aspects of our sound here. Now I skipped over one little section of the synthesizer module here, and that is right here where it says Fat, Fanfare, and Lead. We chose a preset called Galaxy Fanfare, so that was pre-made, it was a lead preset. If I click here, I can keep all the other settings we have, but I can change the basis of our sound. So I could change this and switch to, say, the Euro lead, which, as you see, dark and bright remain the same, as well as fast and slow, but we get 3 different knobs down here, a different way of adjusting our sound, because this sound will be quite different from that first sound we were playing. We're still within the preset even though we've edited it, so things like our effects, which we haven't gotten to yet, will remain the same. So here, just for example, you can see that we have a character knob now, as well as bite and flavor. That one's quite drastic. All that to say, we'll use the synthesizer section of Usynth to change the core characteristic of our sounds. We'll always have access to darken or brighten a sound, as well as change that attack time from fast and slow, and then we'll get 3 specific parameters unique to each individual sound. We can start with a preset, or we can change the core source sound that the whole thing is based on right here in this menu. I'll go back to Fat Fanfare, our original sound. I want to jump over here and talk about Finisher, but let's take a quick moment to look at this little icon down here, the little keyboard with a question mark icon. I want you to focus just on this section here. We'll come back to this one in a moment. Here we can adjust basic things like our bend range. So right now it's 2 semitones. I can change that to be a whole octave, or go as extreme as 4 octaves. I'm going to change it back to 2 semitones for now. We can also adjust the octave, so if you wanted a sound that was like specifically for a bass, you could bring it way down low without having to transpose on your keyboard. I'll keep that normal. We've also got a scale functionality here, so if you're not too familiar with how to play keys, you can set it to a given scale. Let's go ahead and set it to C or A minor, so C major, the relative minor is A, meaning that all of these notes now, every note, even these black keys, which aren't normally in C major, will play notes in our key. And you have all of these scales here to choose from. Following that, down here we have chord. So now we can do a major chord with 1 note. But what's interesting is, since I still have scale turned on, A in the key of C should be A minor. It even says it right there. And we're getting the A minor chord. So these 2 functions are talking to each other. So you can compose a full chord progression in key with a combination of these 2 functions. And of course, you can play more complex or interesting chords other than just root position triads. We also have the ability to set our dynamics here. That is going to alter how Usynth responds to our velocity. So if I turn it down to 0%, no matter how soft or how hard I play the key, it will play at the same velocity. There won't be any dynamics. If I crank that to 100%, there will be a big difference between playing a key softly and playing a key very loudly. And then we also have adjustments to tuning here. Fine tuning. You wanted to fine tune something. For now, I'm going to go ahead and turn our chord and scale mode off. And I'm going to jump out of this menu by clicking this X, and now we're going to talk about the finisher section of the plugin. It's important to note that in this preset, the finisher section was turned on. There's a little power button here where we can turn sections on and off. That power button is available on a few different sections in Usynth, and I'll show you those in a bit. But the finisher is essentially the effects that's going to process the sound of our synthesizer. So in this preset, we're given a finisher with an effect called Grain Clouds. And each finisher has this effect level knob so that we can dial it in as much as we want to be completely extreme, completely affected, or come down and just subtly affected. And just like our synthesizer module, we have specific parameters depending on the type of effect that we've chosen that we can change. So for this one, we have a chaos knob. Let's see what that does. Far more chaotic in terms of the pitch stuff that's happening there in the grain delay. We also have interval, so it was doing sevenths before. Very, very cool. Again, these will change depending on what type of effect you choose, and there are actually 3 categories of effects in the finisher. We have single, dual, and quad. This basically refers to the amount of effects that are going to be used in that given preset. So single, as you can imagine, are just single effects. If you really need to filter something, or if you want to make something sound super lo-fi, we've got the lo-fi effect. But you can see that these are all named very simply. There's compressor, there's a phaser, there's the grain delay, gator, etc. Single effects. Dual, we start to get into combinations, so combining a couple different effects. So here we can see that there's lo-fi chorus. So we get a little bit of that bit crushing from the lo-fi before to now a chorus sound. And as you can see, the parameters here have changed. We can change the crushing, that's the lo-fi aspect. Crush and crash. And then there's also chorus, because this is a dual effect here in the finisher. And if we go down to quad, you'll start to see even more complex combinations of effects that have slightly more abstract names. Trippy filter delay. Let's crank that up so you can hear it nice and loud. And you can see that we have the ability to adjust the grain delay, the phaser, the flanger, and a bandpass filter, I believe. So depending on what level of effects do you want to use something that's just a utility from single, or do you want to start to get more creative with some of the stuff in dual and quad and really transform your sound with effects? Up to you. That is the finisher section here in Usynth, but there's 2 other effects that we can apply to any sound in Usynth. That is our reverb and our delay, both of which are currently turned off. So actually, let me go ahead and turn off our finisher so we can really hear the effects of this reverb, which I'm going to turn on, and this delay, which I'm also going to turn on. Reverb is exactly what you'd expect. Actually, let's isolate just the reverb and turn just that on. So here I've got a large hall reverb, and here are all the presets you're able to choose from. So we can go from something more small room, and then we can go up to, say, a stadium. And you have the ability to dial that in with a knob here, similar to our delay, which I'll turn off our reverb for now. We have different presets for the delay as well. Let's hear what this ping pong sounds like. And I'll crank the feedback up, which is essentially how long those delays are going to go for. We can also adjust the rate. These are currently set to quarter notes, and my DAW is set to 102 BPM. Let's change that to an 1/8 note. And let's try one different preset. Let's try dark. Interesting. So more of a filtered sound on the delay here. So those are just 2 more effects you can use to transform your sound. Basic reverb and some delay. Okay, next up is something really fun, the third and last module that we've been avoiding up until now. Let's go ahead and turn it on. This is the sequencer. If that sounds a little scary or advanced for you, don't worry too much. It can actually function pretty much like a normal arpeggiator if you want it to. So if you haven't gotten, with the program here on Usynth, you notice in each module we can select and change core things about the section. Here on the sequencer, we can change the type of sequencer it is. And if I just go to arpeggios, and now that sequencer is on, if I hold down a key, we're hearing, and I'm going to go ahead and make that attack nice and fast so that we can hear this clearly. We're hearing a repeated arpeggio. Now if I play a chord, we're arpeggiating through that chord, just as you'd imagine. And like you usually see on lots of arpeggiators, we have the ability to latch, meaning all I have to do is play these notes once, lift my hands from the keyboard, and it'll continue to play. We also have sync mode, and if we set that to beat mode, it'll be synced with my DAW's tempo. And here on rate, it works as you might expect when we're here in the arpeggio mode, where it is of course changing the rate of arpeggiation here. That's pretty much expected. What's really interesting is another way we can control this arpeggiator is with these key switches down here, which if you had a longer MIDI keyboard than I have, you could actually control it with your controller. And let me actually go for that. If I lower the octave, I can play notes here, and I can use these lower keys to adjust aspects of the sequencer. So you can hear this pattern that we're playing right now when I select this E key. If I select the F key, the pattern changes. Different types of arpeggiations, different types of patterns. We've also got on the black keys here the ability to mute, repeat a single note, double the speed, triple, quadruple, and stop. These are controls you can use in real time as part of performance, or you can also use it in the MIDI piano roll to have control while you're composing and recording in the DAW. This really comes in handy when we start to look at some of the other modes here in the sequencer. But I actually want to switch sounds because I want to show you a really cool sound from a different title that utilizes the sequencer. Here's a really beautiful sound called Dreaming of Video from Caramel. I just hold this key down, it's going to play through this sequence. If I use these switches here, it will change that sequence. Let's change it again. Again, using these keys to change our sequence. I'm gonna hold the ×2. Repeat a note, mute, etc. So as you can see, that sequence was much more advanced than just your normal arpeggiation. That is because similar to how in the synthesizer section of each pack, we have different types of sounds, different types of synths, in the sequencer of each pack comes with unique types of sequences, arpeggiations, and rhythms. So let's switch to rhythms 1. So there we get that more chord stabby thing rather than just playing through the notes. So let's just try a different phrase from sequencer here, and let's try suspended cadence. Wow. Way bigger. Very interesting. Somehow we could definitely start a song with this. Very intense. The sequencer is there to get you started and inspired with songs, and it's also there to be an arpeggiator when you need it. Similar to all the other sections of the plugin, we have a selection of macro knobs that will change based on the type of sequence that we choose. We can choose things like our pattern length, the octaves it will play through, things like swing, and note length as well. So while some of these are pre-made musical ideas, you have control over altering them, whether you do that via using different patterns you can select via the switching here, speeding it up, or also altering these parameters here. If we jump back into that little keyboard with a question mark panel, this gives you a nice little diagram of what this section on the keyboard is all about, which is very important when you're using the sequencer. Okay, one fun aspect for you here, this little surprise section with the dice. If I click this little surprise, things in my plugin will start to change. You can see right away, parameters are changing. This is sort of a randomization. That sounds totally different than what we had before. Let's roll the dice again. need a little more inspiration and you want to start randomizing things, you can do it right there with the surprise button. And this knob here, small/big, determines basically how much randomization is going to happen. So if I pull this down to 1 and I click surprise, you're probably seeing very minute changes in the plugin. And the sound actually isn't changing all that much. If I crank that up to the extremes, our sound is going to change drastically. It completely changed the core elements of our sound. But don't fear, you can always go back with this undo button and go back to where you were originally. So for this, it's a matter of dialing it in so that you get a little bit of randomization, but don't totally lose the sound that you had if that's not your goal. And also take a look here on Sequencer, Synthesizer, and Finisher. There are dice icons that are currently turned on, and if we turn those off, it will not randomize those sections. So if I keep just Synthesizer on the randomization, I'll keep these cool chords we're getting from the sequencer, I'll keep my finisher effects, and then I'll hit surprise, and only my synth will change. Sequencer and finisher not being affected by the randomization because we've turned off. But I'm going to turn them back on. So let's say you've been working on a sound and you really like it. You've randomized it, you've dialed in all your settings, you've got a very cool sound here. You want to keep that sound, you want to save it as your own. We want to go ahead and click this icon up here, save the user preset. We can call this Taetro tutorial. And I can go ahead and save that to maybe pads soft, I guess. And I'll click save and boom, it's saved. But if I decide, I could make this preset better, maybe make some more changes, randomize, change some effects, I can just click this save button here, which will overwrite that current preset. And then going back to my preset browser here, I can go to the user section. I'll have all my factory presets here, but then when I go to the user section, I will be able to find that preset. So hopefully you can see here that whether you want to just jump right into making music and not have to worry about fussing with too many parameters, or you want to really tweak a sound to make it your own, it's all possible in Usynth, and it's very, very accessible and very, very welcoming for beginners and advanced music makers alike. Reminder that all of the titles in Usynth have a trial period, and there are many titles that are based around genres. So if you're looking for making some like EDM dance music, Euphoria might be for you. If you want to get into the retro gaming stuff, Pixel might be for you as well. Give each one a try and decide which sounds you want to be using to make the most out of your time making music with Usynth. Real quick, I'll mention that all the drums you heard in the beginning demos, those were used using Virtual Drummer, which is also by Ujam. And then for the lo-fi beat, I used Beatmaker Cozy. Links to everything you know will be down in the description. I also have a YouTube channel, so if you enjoyed the way I explained things, I've got lots of tutorials over there. We'll leave a link to that in the description as well. That's going to be it for now. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Taetro here with Ujam. Have a good one.